Hello everybody and welcome back to another video and another review of the World Cup games. Today I'm doing day 11. This includes France, who played USA, and New Zealand faced off against the Canadians. Let's get straight into it. So the first game of the day was France versus the USA, and as the old cliche goes, which France will turn up in this game, and we got the poor France. Yeah, I think France weren't very good against the Americans, and they were a bit sloppy. They had a lot of chances, and there was a lot of drop balls, and I know the Japanese weather will do this, the humidity and things like that, but they train for these, they train for the weather changes, they train in the humid conditions. And for me, they just didn't work with it very well. They started very well, got 2 early tries, they did well, started well, and it looked like they were playing well, they were playing good rugby. They were, because they were getting the ball out, they were shipping it, they were showing good attacking intent, but then it's the final ball. The final pass, the final bit of movement and the kick, it just fell apart. They were doing phase play at points and then they would just knock it on. They would do passes when they didn't need to do passes, offloads when they didn't need to do offloads. And I feel like France started to get frustrated with themselves doing this. And because of that, they tried to force things that weren't on. So they were trying to force a really long pass, for example, and they were forcing offloads that didn't need to be offloaded and things like that. And that's why France, for me, didn't play brilliantly, because they didn't finish off the chances. They could have steamrolled the American side, because not the American side wasn't bad, but France had the chances to do so, and they opened up the American defence. They got through time after time. Raka was outstanding, breaking through the lines all the time. He was amazing, but it was the final ball, the final play, trying to get over the line and trying to score that try that caused them to struggle. But it's not that America didn't play badly. The US played well, they defended well, they did well, and they got 9 points, which is alright, that's decent. They got within 3 at one point of the French team. It was 12-9 coming into the last 20 minutes of the game or so, which is a good thing for USA. It shows that they're getting better, and they are getting better. They weren't brilliant against England, and they really stepped up. They played much better. They defended well at points. They did get stretched out wide and broken through a couple of times, but their scramble defence was good, and their one-up defence was good as well. So pushing up and straight out of phase ball was pretty good. But for me, I feel like the Americans need to up a bit more on their attacking intensity. I don't think they really bothered France with their attack. I don't think France were really worried about them at any point. And the French defence isn't amazing. The Americans could have broken through them, but I feel like they just struggled to get any sort of momentum in terms of attack. They had momentum in defence, they had momentum on the scoreboard, but they couldn't string anything together to create a real attacking threat for France. And AJ McGinty, again, he played pretty well today. He didn't play as well as he did against England, but he did play well, and he was the one who was starting all the attacks off, but they just couldn't string any real attacking threat together, and it ended up being easy for France to defend. But I feel like they got those penalties, and they got the momentum from the penalties, and they ended up 3 points behind. It was 12-9 at a point, but then I think France started to come into their own, and I think it's all thanks to the try of Gaël Fickou. Once Gaël Fickou went over, I feel like the Americans tired out as soon as that try went over, and the French started to dominate. They started to go all over them and start scoring the tries. And you wonder why couldn't they do that earlier on, but I do think it's because the US were putting them under a lot of pressure early on, and the French couldn't get through and they couldn't string anything together. But as I say, once Gaël Fickou got the third score, I feel like the US started to tire off after that, and the French started to come into their own and expose the gaps that were left through the tight legs of the US. And I think that's where the game was won. The US had the chance. They could have, if they could have strung a bit more attacking threat together, they could have posed more of a threat, and they could have actually won this game. But I feel the tiredness again came into it. The Tier 2 nations not having the fitness to cope with the Tier 1 nations. And I feel like that came into it, and that's how France managed to get away in the end. They won 34 points to 9. It wasn't easy. The scoreboard doesn't tell the whole story. And for me, I don't think France will go into their next game with a lot of confidence, because they weren't amazing, but they got the job done. And I guess that's the thing that they care about in the end. They got 5 points and they got the job done. So they did alright on that part. For USA though, they're definitely getting better, and their next game against Argentina will be a good one. They'll pose a threat to Argentina, I think. If they can just up a bit more attack intensity, then they could pose a big threat, and I'm looking forward to it. But for now, France won. Scoreboard doesn't tell the story, but France won, and they go on to their next game against Tonga in 4 days' time with a nice victory. So the second game of the day was New Zealand versus Canada. Now, this one, before the start, I think it was pretty obvious who was going to win. I think it was pretty obvious that it was going to be a battering, and that it was. You know, sometimes I feel bad for the teams that are on the losing end of him, because Canada lost 63-0 to New Zealand, and sometimes, yeah, I feel bad for them. But, you know, there are always positives to take out of games. And Canada got 0, but I think there will be a couple of positives. And one of them being that they only allowed New Zealand to have 4 tries before the break. Now that may not seem good, but I think that's alright, because they started poorly. New Zealand got 2 tries early on, really quickly, and then they got a third soon after. But then Canada started to hold on. They started to show a bit more threat. They started to play with the ball a bit, and they were starting to throw it around. They weren't exactly hurting New Zealand. They weren't giving them any threat at all, but they held on to the ball. They were defending New Zealand, and there was that little period in the first half where Canada were doing alright, and I think they can take a little bit of positive out of that part of the first half. It's not a lot, but they can take a positive out of that. And also for Canada, I think that it's just the fact of going out there and playing your hearts out and just showing the world what you can do. They didn't score any points, but they never gave up. They were always there. They were always trying to put in the tackles. They were always trying to create something when they had the ball, which wasn't very often. But yeah, they were just giving it their all throughout the game, and that's good to see. They may not have hurt New Zealand, they may not have tested them at all, but they tried to give them a good game as much as they could. And yeah, they did that. They showed heart, they showed dignity, they didn't give up, and that's a good thing when you go down to the margin they did, because it's really easy to put your head down and just see the rest of the game through playing poorly. But I don't think Canada did that. They kept their head up, they kept playing. They knew they weren't better than New Zealand. They were about 20 rankings below them, so they just kept on playing to the best of their ability and seeing what happened. And yeah, for doing that, I think they should be proud for doing that. And it's going to be tough. They're playing New Zealand, and you just got to think they played to the best of their ability, and they were always going to get battered. But for New Zealand, you can't really take much out of a game like this as New Zealand. They can't take much out of this. They did play well. They showed their attacking threat. That first part of the second half, I don't know, the first 10, 15 minutes? They scored 4 tries in the first 10 minutes of that second half, and that was amazing. New Zealand was showing the attacking intent. They were playing brilliantly. There were a couple of errors, there were a couple of knock-ons, of course. Scott Barrett's when he was about to score a try, Bowden Barrett when he was about to score a try at the end. There were those things, but they were allowed to make those mistakes because they were so superior to Canada. They were allowed to make the mistakes, they were allowed to make errors because they just make up for it in the abundance of attack. And they just kept flooding Canada. They kept flooding, and it's good that New Zealand never gave up either. They showed them respect. They didn't lay off. They didn't put their foot off the gas. They were always there. They were always peppering Canada, and there's only so much a defence like Canada's can take, and when you're playing New Zealand you're going to ship a lot of tries, and they did, and yeah, it's fair play. As I said, New Zealand won't be able to take much out of this, but they'll be able to take some plays that worked. Their attacking worked really well, some of the attacking phases, some of the attacking plays that worked, they'll be able to take them into the next game and try and use them even more. And really, I think New Zealand played alright. I don't think they were the finished article, but they're playing Canada, so they can make mistakes, as I said. But other than that, they were fantastic. The attacking was brilliant. Didn't really have to defend that much, so we didn't really get to see how they defended, but they were fantastic. I said they weren't the finished article. I'm just saying that because they made a couple of errors, made a couple of knock-ons and all that, but you're going to get that in the humid conditions with a slippy ball. But yeah, other than that, New Zealand were fantastic, and they are peaking at the right time for this World Cup, and I think other teams are still looking at them and thinking, how are we going to beat them? But we'll see what happens. Their next game, of course, 4 days away against Namibia. I expect them to make changes for that, but we'll see how they get on in that game. We'll see if they go the same sort of way and just pepper and keep at it for the full 80, because that is a good sign of respect. But yeah, they played well. Canada showed heart. New Zealand played brilliantly, and yeah, it ended 63-0 to New Zealand. So yeah, that is my review of day 11 of the World Cup. Put down in the comments below what you thought of those games, and put down who you think is going to win this World Cup at the moment. Of course, there's been decent performances. New Zealand have put in amazing performances. Wales have put in good performances. England have as well. So put down in the comments who you think is at this stage going to win the World Cup. Give a like and subscribe. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you in a bit.